Okay, so this
is not the game.
No, this is not the game. I'm
Yeah.
going to show you kind of how we create a planet, right, in a really basic way. So we're going to start with flatland. Okay, so flatland's really boring. Okay, this is an infinite world of flatness, basically, right, that goes on and on forever. So you can kind of imagine that that's easy to generate, right? So actually when we did the Late Show and we added this button that allows us to jump to other planets if we look at them. So I've created a solar system here just to demonstrate how a planet's generated. If you can bear with me, basically, right? I hope this isn't confusing. So I'm stood on flatland right now, and I'm going to jump to another planet, and that planet just follows a sine wave. Okay, so a sine wave is like the simplest mathematical equation. It just goes up and down and up and down, okay? So hopefully that will work. So this is planet sine wave, right? And so, like, it's ridiculous how this even still looks a little bit like mountains and things like that, and you can imagine how it would sort of work and how it's sort of cool, right? So it's endlessly going up and down, but the thing that is important to point out is that because it's a maths equation, the peak of this mountain will always be the peak of this mountain exactly here. And I can generate that without knowing anything else about the world. I can generate just this tiny, like, as in I can fly to this world from, you know, across light years of space and instantly generate exactly how high off the ground you should be at this point. And you'll see that when I'm jumping between, I don't know if this is making any sense, but when I'm jumping between worlds, you'll see that there's no loading time. They're just generating straight away. So I just look up at the sky, look at a point that I want to go to, fly there, and instantly it starts generating that world around you, and it knows how high off the ground you should be and things like that. So I could walk forever on this planet. Well, not forever, but for a long time. And I would go through boring mountains over and over again, right? And you can see that you get an interesting thing from me in terms of, I do a lot of the terrain generation like this. The thing I find really interesting is like how you get no sense of scale right now in sine world. You know, you need rocks and mountains and trees and things like that just to even get a sense. I'm actually running here, but you get no sense of that, right? And a lot of the gameplay, the juiciness or whatever, comes from actually the shape of the terrain and how it reveals itself, a bit like Journey when we were looking at that earlier. So if I look up, we can go to a planet that's a bit more complicated. So this is just effectively layers and layers of Fourier transforms and sine waves and noise.
I'll just translate. So you're basically mashing up equations in ways that are sort of
more complicated. So you can imagine many, many octaves of that sine wave. So if you imagine an oscilloscope that goes up and down with a sine wave, and you imagine what an actual sound wave looks like, it kind of judders along that, right? And suddenly, I don't know what you think, but like for me, it starts to look like a real terrain. You could imagine this being a real place, sort of, and you start to get a sense of scale and stuff like that. It's not the prettiest planet ever, but it's interesting, right?
And now we've entered a realm where you actually don't know what's on the other side of that
right,
realm.
And it's not repeating, and it is different, and I can be surprised. I can start seeing caves and things like that forming. And so if I add a little bit of water to this planet, and kind of bring in a sea level and add a little bit more detail. So you can see it starts to look a bit more real and a bit more interesting. And you know, a thing that I was trying to describe to you is that hopefully for people here now, this looks like hills and mountains and stuff. I personally, like, cannot see that. Like, all I can see is just a maths equation. I mean, this just looks like a graph to me. And it's just really obvious to me that this is a graph that's just kind of, you know, a three-dimensional graph of, I can pick out the various different noise points and stuff like that. But hopefully it starts to begin to look like a real thing. Dave, I know I said we'd go into creatures, but I won't just yet. I'll just go to the next one. So I'll just add like some creatures and some like life to this, basically, and grow some foliage and stuff, which is here. So suddenly, I don't know if you remember what it looked like when I stood, when I kind of came out of the water, but hopefully you'll see that it's the same place. And this is what it looks like now. And you can still see those hills in the distance and those kind of weird rock formations and stuff.
And we haven't talked about it, but even the creature sounds are procedurally generated.
Right.
Sean, what is the most difficult part of this process? Or what has been, if is it possible to isolate in building a planet from math?
I think something that's believable and that plays well and kind of actually reveals itself well. The human mind is really good at picking out what's real and what's not, you know, and understanding aesthetic rules and things like that. And math is not really good at creating those things. So just, if I walk around this a little bit, even if I fly up, I don't know if I can go into fly cam. Yeah, I can. So if I pull out a little bit. So you can kind of see that there's a whole planet out there. And it's an interesting one. It's one you can kind of like, you could look at and hopefully say, oh, I want to go over there or whatever. Now you don't normally, this is a debug cam and you don't normally see those things, see these kind of things, but it's quite cool. You know, you can see that even in the water there, there's still like life and detail and stuff. So for me, this is, you know, this is just a cool space to explore, right? To find out what's out there. And one that I'm kind of constantly surprised by.
When I was at Hello Games, I was sitting next to Grant at one point, and the line between working and exploring would sometimes blur. Because sometimes you would just want to, I remember I was asking him, he was checking out how a particular piece of architecture was looking. And then I was asking, well, what part of that checking are you doing now? And then he was like, well, I kind of just wanted to see what was in this game. So were there moments like that for you where you found something really surprising in the process of building?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nature of the game is that it's very emergent. So you will find life where you didn't expect it to grow. You know, you will find life growing in weird ways as well. Creatures that look like you didn't expect them to and stuff. Like one of my favorite things is just, and this makes me sound so simplistic basically, but like seeing a cave, you know? Like I can basically not find a cave and just leave it there. I have to see what is in that cave, and I don't know. I think that's like human nature or something, you know? Like we're born explorers basically. But if I find, like especially an underwater cave, I'm like, what is at the bottom of this cave, you know? And it's always a thrill when you see like something just come out of it, like a creature or you know, or find something down there. You just feel that thrill, you know. So I think it's natural to have that. Probably my favorite moments just come from weird bugs and stuff like that, like when you see the fish start to fly or something like that, you know. Those moments are really cool. We can show you a little bit of, which I think we've shown a few times before, but kind of in different ways. So, like these creatures and things like that, I don't know if you pop into the editor, Dave, the way that creatures are made is procedural as well. And so it's a bit like if you imagine in an MMO where you create a creature, you know, you create your character from a whole bunch of sliders. It's the same for us. Every prop that's in the game has those sliders. There's like hundreds of thousands of kind of variations and differentiations kind of thing that come from that. And so we just generate those randomly.